The school secretary's voice was polite. Careful, even. Like she delivered this kind of news before and had learned to soften it just enough to keep the person on the other end from falling apart in the lobby. "Mr. Callahan," she said, "I'm sorry, but your name isn't showing on our authorized pickup list for Marcus. You'll need to contact the parents before we can release him to you." I stood at that front desk for a moment. Just stood there.
Behind me, I could hear children laughing somewhere down the hall, sneakers squeaking on linoleum. The smell of cafeteria food still hung in the air from lunch. I'd been in this building so many times that the front office staff knew my name, and Marcus knew to look for my truck in the third spot from the corner of the parking lot.
And now I was a stranger. I thanked the secretary. I don't know why exactly, but I did. Walked back to my truck and sat in that parking lot for a long time. Long enough to watch 3 other grandparents collect their grandchildren and drive away. Long enough to watch Marcus's classroom window from across the lot and wonder if he was looking for me. I didn't cry. I'm 67 years old. I've buried a wife. I've rebuilt an engine block in January in an unheated garage because a family needed their car back by Monday morning. Crying in a school parking lot wasn't something I had in me right then. What I had instead was a very clear, very quiet understanding of exactly what had just happened and exactly when it had started. My name is Roy Callahan. I spent 31 years as a diesel mechanic in Des Moines, Iowa, before my knees made the decision for me that it was time to retire. My wife, Carol, passed 6 years ago, pancreatic cancer, 14 months from diagnosis to the end. After that, it was just me and the house and the garage and whatever I could find to keep my hands busy. My son, Derek, was 39. He worked in logistics coordination for a regional freight company. Decent salary, decent benefits. He married a woman named Pam about 8 years back, and together they had a son, Marcus, who was 7 years old at the time all of this happened. Pam was organized, opinionated, and sharp. When things were good between us, I respected that about her. When things weren't good, that sharpness had an edge to it that could cut. For about 2 years, I had been Marcus's after-school person. That was the arrangement. Derek and Pam both worked until at least 5:30 most evenings, sometimes later. The school day ended at 3:15. Somebody had to bridge that gap. Daycare in their neighborhood ran about $800 a month for after-school care alone, and neither of them wanted to pay it when, as Pam had put it, Grandpa's home anyway. She wasn't wrong that I was home, but she said it the way people say things when they've already decided what the answer is going to be, and they just need you to confirm it. I said yes. I meant it genuinely. Marcus was a good kid, quiet in the way that smart children are quiet, always carrying a book, always asking questions that took a second to answer properly. Picking him up 3 days a week became 4 days a week, and by the end of the first year it was 5 days a week, every week, school year, and summer camp pickups included. I kept track of it. Not because I was planning anything. I kept track because I'm a mechanic, and mechanics keep logs. It's habit. Mileage, dates, what time I arrived, whether there were early dismissals. Which Tuesdays I brought Marcus back to my house for dinner because Derek and Pam had something going on. I wrote it down in a small spiral notebook I kept in the glove compartment of my truck, the same way I used to log oil changes and brake jobs. Nobody asked me to do that. Nobody knew I was doing it. Here's the thing about being useful to family. They don't always see the usefulness. They see the availability. And those are two very different things. Availability is assumed. Usefulness, once it becomes routine, becomes invisible. I'm not saying that to be bitter. I'm saying it because it's true. And I've had enough time to sit with it, to know it without anger. There were good stretches, genuine ones. Pam used to call me every couple of weeks just to talk, not to ask for anything, just to talk. She had a complicated relationship with her own father, and I think she was, in her way, trying to build something with me that she'd missed out on with him. She once told me, right before Marcus started kindergarten, that I was the most reliable man she had ever known. She meant it. I could hear it. Derek and I had our rhythms too. He'd come by the garage on Saturday mornings sometimes, not to work on anything, just to stand there with a cup of coffee and watch me putter around. He'd inherited nothing of my mechanical instinct. Couldn't change a tire without consulting a video, but he liked being around it. I think the garage reminded him of something solid. Those are the years I go back to when I'm trying to be fair. But somewhere in the third year of the Marcus arrangement, something shifted in the way they talked to me. Requests got less like requests and more like reminders. Conversations that used to end with, "Thank you, Roy," started ending with logistical handoffs, and money started coming up. Not dramatically, not all at once. It started the way it usually starts. A casual mention, a "what do you think?" a "we've been looking at some options and wondered if you had any thoughts." The first time was a home equity suggestion. Derek mentioned that he and Pam were thinking about refinancing and asked if I'd ever considered doing the same with my house, maybe pulling some cash out to have it available. I told him I didn't have a mortgage anymore. Carol and I had paid it off 11 years ago, and that I had no interest in putting the house back in debt. He nodded and dropped it. The second time was a credit card thing. Pam mentioned that one of their cards had a high rate and asked if I'd ever considered adding a family member to one of my accounts to help them build credit. I said I'd think about it. I didn't think about it. It didn't come up again. The third time was the truck loan. Derek called me on a Tuesday night. I remember because Marcus and I had just gotten back from getting ice cream. It was a warmer evening for October in Iowa, and Marcus had wanted to go, and I didn't see any reason to say no. I'd just dropped him at home and was back at my house, sitting in the kitchen with the television on and not really watching it. Derek asked if I had a few minutes. I said I did. He told me he'd found a truck. A used one, a 3-year-old heavy-duty pickup that would let him pick up side work on weekends, hauling equipment for contractors, things like that. The payments were manageable, he said. The interest rate wasn't bad. The one issue was that his credit score had taken a hit the previous year because of some medical bills they were still working through, and the lender was asking for a cosigner. He wanted me to cosign. I asked him to send me the loan details. He texted them over. I looked at them that night, and again the next morning. The loan amount was $23,400. The term was 60 months. Derek's income was solid, but his debt-to-income ratio was already stretched. If he missed payments, if the side work didn't materialize, if the freight job changed, if anything shifted, I was on the hook for all of it. My credit, which I had kept clean for 40 years, would take the hit. And at 67, with retirement savings that were careful but not extravagant, I was not in a position to absorb that kind of liability. I called Derek the next morning and told him I couldn't do it. I was calm about it. I told him exactly why, the same way I just told you. I said I loved him and I wanted him to do well, but I wasn't able to put my credit and my financial security on the line for a loan I had no control over. I offered to help him look into other options, a different lender, a shorter term, a smaller loan amount, something. But the cosign wasn't something I could do. He was quiet on the phone for a long stretch. Then he said he understood. Then he said he had to go. That was a Wednesday morning. By Thursday, my name was gone from the school pickup list. I didn't find out until Friday afternoon when I drove to Jefferson Elementary at 3:10, as I had done hundreds of times before, and walked to the front desk, and the secretary looked at her screen and said those words. "Your name isn't showing on our authorized pickup list for Marcus." I want you to understand something about that moment. I had brought that child home from school so many times that his teacher had once sent me a handwritten thank you note at the end of the year for being so consistent. The front office staff knew my truck. They knew I kept a spare granola bar in my jacket. They knew Marcus called me Poppy Roy. And now I was not on the list. I drove home. I sat in my kitchen. I pulled out my spiral notebook from the glove compartment. I also pulled out my phone and went back through every text message between me and Derek and between me and Pam, going back months. The loan conversation was there, easy to find. Wednesday morning, 10:47 a.m. I'd said I couldn't do the cosign. He'd said he understood. The pickup list change. I didn't know when exactly it had been made, but I intended to find out. If you've ever been the person in your family who shows up quietly, without fanfare, without keeping score, and then one day you realize the showing up was only valued as long as it came with financial compliance, subscribe to Charles' Revenge right now. Hit that bell. Because what comes next is what happens when you finally stop being quiet and start being prepared. I called Derek that Friday evening. I kept my voice level. I told him I'd gone to pick up Marcus and had been turned away. I asked what was going on. He said there had been some scheduling changes and they were reorganizing the pickup arrangements. He said it was temporary while they figured things out. He said Marcus was fine and I didn't need to worry. I asked him directly, was this connected to the loan conversation? He said no. He said I was reading into things. He said he had to help Pam with dinner and he'd call me over the weekend. He did not call over the weekend. I called Pam on Monday. She answered on the third ring, which surprised me. She said the pickup change was about logistics, that Marcus had started an after-school reading program that ran until 4:30, and the new arrangement was simpler for everyone. She was pleasant about it. She was also lying because I had checked the school website, and there was no reading program that started that week. The next after-school program didn't begin until January. I wrote that down too. I also called the loan officer, whose voicemail Derek had mentioned early in our conversation. Apparently, Derek had given him my name as a potential reference before I'd even agreed to anything. The officer left me a message that Thursday, the day after my refusal, asking if I'd had a chance to review the cosign paperwork. I called back, identified myself, and told him clearly that I was not cosigning and that my name should not be associated with the application. He confirmed it, and that was that. That voicemail, that callback, logged. 3 weeks went by. I did not go to the school. I did not drive by the house. I went to my garage, worked on a neighbor's lawnmower and a church van. Someone had asked me to look at, cook dinner for myself, and waited. Marcus called me on my cell phone one evening. It was a Saturday, almost 6 o'clock, and I could tell he was calling from his room because I could hear the particular quiet of his closet, which was where he always went to talk privately, even at 7 years old. He asked me if I was mad at him. I told him I was not mad at him. I told him I thought about him every day and that nothing between us had changed. I told him Poppy Roy was just giving his mom and dad some space, but that he could always call me when he wanted to. He said, okay. Then he said I missed the granola bars. I told him I'd save him some. That was the hardest 30 seconds of this whole thing. Not the secretary at the front desk, not Derek's silence on the phone, not Pam's pleasant practiced lie about the reading program. That 30-second phone call with a 7-year-old boy standing in his closet, wondering what he'd done wrong. That was the moment I decided I was going to let the truth speak clearly. I called the school the following week. I asked to speak with the administrative secretary, a woman named Mrs. Hendricks, who had been at that school for 16 years and who had, frankly, seen everything. I introduced myself. I was Roy Callahan, Marcus Callahan's grandfather,
the one who had been on the pickup list until recently. I asked calmly and politely whether she would be able to tell me when the list change had been made.
She looked it up. The change had been submitted online at 7:52 in the morning on Thursday, the day after my Wednesday call with Derek. I asked if she could note that the original list, the one that had included me for the past 2 years, was on file. She said it was. I asked if the school kept logs of actual authorized pickups. She said they did, going back to the beginning of the school year, and that the records could be pulled if there was ever a custody or care dispute requiring documentation. I thanked her. I asked for nothing further. But I had what I needed. About 6 weeks after the pickup incident, Derek called to say that he'd been thinking and that maybe I could come to Sunday dinner the following weekend. He said it casually, the way you'd mention something on a grocery list. He said Pam thought it would be good for Marcus. I said I'd come. I drove over on that Sunday with a bag of granola bars and a container of the chili Marcus liked. We ate dinner. Marcus sat next to me and told me about a book he was reading about deep-sea creatures. Pam kept the conversation light. Derek was quieter than usual, which meant something. After dinner, while Pam and Marcus were in the other room, Derek brought up the truck again. He said he'd found a different lender, a better rate, didn't need a cosigner anymore. He said it almost like an apology, but not quite. Like he was hoping I'd fill in the remaining space with one. I nodded and said I was glad he'd found a solution. Then I told him I needed to say something, and I asked him to listen without interrupting. I told him I understood he was frustrated when I said no to the loan. I told him I knew that wasn't the answer he was hoping for. But I also told him that what happened afterward, removing me from that pickup list the very next morning, using my access to Marcus as leverage to punish me for a financial decision I had every right to make, that was something I was not going to pretend hadn't happened. I put the spiral notebook on the table. I put my phone beside it, open to the text thread showing the timestamp of his cosign request and my refusal. I told him that I had also confirmed with the school that the list change was submitted at 7:52 a.m. on the Thursday after our Wednesday call. And I told him that I had spoken with the loan officer, who had confirmed that my name had been attached to the application as a potential cosigner before I'd even agreed to be involved. Derek didn't say anything for a long moment. Then he said, "Dad, I didn't mean for it to come across that way." I told him I understood that intention and outcome aren't always the same thing, but that my ability to see Marcus, my place in that boy's daily life, could not be a negotiating chip, not for a truck loan, not for anything. 2 weeks later, I received a call from the school. Mrs. Hendricks again, professional as always. She wanted to let me know that my name had been restored to Marcus's authorized pickup list. I thanked her. She said she was glad it had been sorted out. I drove to that school the following Tuesday at 3:10. I parked in the third spot from the corner. I had a granola bar in my jacket pocket. Marcus came through the front doors with his backpack on and his book under his arm, and when he saw my truck, he ran. The way kids run when they've genuinely missed someone, not just as a greeting, but as a release. He climbed in and immediately started telling me about the deep-sea creature book before he'd even put his seatbelt on. I let him talk. I drove. Things are different now. Not broken, but different in the way things are different when you've seen something you can't unsee. I'm still on the pickup list. I still see Marcus on Tuesdays and Thursdays, though the arrangement is more formal now, confirmed at the beginning of each month, written down by both sides. Derek and I talk, but with a kind of careful distance that wasn't there before. Pam is polite in the practiced way she was always capable of when she wanted to be. Nobody brought up the loan again. The truck Derek eventually bought with the new lender works fine, from what I can tell. The side hauling work didn't really materialize. But that's not my concern. What I keep coming back to is the notebook in my glove compartment. I never started it with any strategic intention. I kept records because that's what I do, because 31 years of diesel mechanics teaches you that everything worth trusting should be documented. I wasn't planning a defense, I was just being thorough. But that notebook, and those texts, and that phone call with the loan officer and Mrs. Hendricks looking up a timestamp on a Thursday morning, all of it mattered. Not because it gave me power over my son and daughter-in-law, but because it gave me something to point to when they tried to rewrite what had happened. When Derek said he didn't mean for it to come across that way, I didn't have to argue. I didn't have to raise my voice. I just put the notebook on the table. There's a particular kind of quiet that comes with being 67 years old and having nothing left to prove. I didn't want to fight. I didn't want to go to court or call a lawyer or blow up the family. I wanted my place in my grandson's life restored to what it was. That's all. I got that, not completely, not cleanly, not without a cost, but I got it. The thing nobody tells you about being the reliable one in a family is that reliability can be mistaken for limitlessness. That because you show up without complaint, because you don't demand recognition, because you find meaning in being useful, people start to believe that your yes is automatic, that your resources, your time, your credit, your love are simply available on request, and that withholding any of them is a kind of betrayal. I am not an ATM. I am not a convenience. I am not someone whose presence in a child's life should be contingent on what I'm willing to sign or fund. I am Marcus's grandfather. That's not a role that comes with conditions. And it's not a role that can be removed with a few keystrokes on a school website when I give an answer someone doesn't like. Carol would have had something sharp to say about all of this. She was always better than me at naming things plainly. I think she would have said that people who genuinely love you don't use your love for someone else as a hostage. She would have been right. And she would have been proud that I kept the notebook. If you're watching this and you've been the reliable one, the grandfather in the parking lot, the father who always shows up, the man who keeps quiet because he doesn't want to cause trouble, I want you to know something. Protecting yourself is not a betrayal of your family. It's the only way to make sure you're still standing when they actually need you. What would you have done? Would you have stayed quiet and eventually come around? Or would you have put the notebook on the table? Leave a comment. I read every single one. And if this story stayed with you, subscribe to Charles Revenge and hit that bell. Every week, we bring you stories of quiet men, real stakes, and the kind of justice that doesn't need to shout. Like this video if you believe a grandfather's place in his grandchild's life should never be for sale.